All right, welcome to another episode of the Educators Podcast. I am Mr. Burden, and with me is one of my new favorite people on the planet. She is the host of The Morning Break on Teacher Talk Radio. She is also the creator of Social Moodia, as well as she's the well-being ambassador to a very, very well-respected football team. That's UK football, not American football. She has been a host for a Ukrainian woman to stay with her, as well as she is a esteemed educator at ARU. I am talking about one of the most positive people on the planet, Dr. Poppy Gibson. Poppy, how are you doing today?
Hi, well, after that amazing intro, how could I not be doing great? Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You've become one of my new favorite people just ever since, and as I continue to become internationally known.
Well, of course, we're all talking about you here in the UK.
Oh, of course. Forget about there was some other big thing going on in the UK, something like a coronation, but that was like second page news. The big news was Mr. Burden graced his vocal skills on your radio show. That was a lot of fun. I hope I didn't talk too much, but I had a lot to say, and it was a lot of fun.
It was so fun. Yeah, you were radio royalty that day.
Radio royalty. I like that. But I really like. I would like your positivity, and I do like your insights to education. And I found that we have a lot of similarities in our United States education system as well as UK. What are some of the, I guess, major concerns, and what's going on in the education system in the UK that's really getting everybody's attention?
So, okay, firstly, thanks for coming on the radio last week. And yeah, it was really interesting to see that some of the challenges we're dealing with at the moment are not so different from you, thousands and thousands of miles away, hours away. The main thing that's going on at the moment, obviously May is our SATs month in the UK. So this is when children in year 6, so they're age 10 and 11, they're in their final year of what we call primary school.
Mm-hmm.
They do their tests in English and maths. There's several papers for English, several papers for maths, and it takes days and days. And these are done nationally in all of our mainstream schools. And at the moment, this is really the consuming people who are working in those schools, because they're feeling the pressure, the children are feeling the pressure, and we always say learning should be fun, but how is it fun when you're sat with a paper and a pencil? And I'm not sure they're that inclusive for people with special needs, and
mm-hmm.
so there's a lot of kind of things that get thrown up during these assessments where we really question how purposeful are they. Obviously in COVID, we couldn't do a lot of these things, and we survived. Education still happened, but we've kind of reverted back to a lot of these testing systems. And I know you and I have chatted about testing before, and I think we're on the same page where assessment is important, of course. We need to know how people have progressed, what they've learned. But when we're giving one paper to all the children, how is this really a fair? I'm sure Aaron, that cartoon where I think there's a monkey, a goldfish. I can't remember it well now. And it's, it says something like, if you judge everyone on how well you can climb a tree. I've really mashed that up.
No. I think if you're an educator, I know you've come across that cartoon, because it's exactly that. It's like, the monkey's gonna win, but if you can judge on who can swim in the ocean the best, it's gonna be the fish. And you're exactly that. And we talked about the high stakes testing, the anxiety that comes with it, and like if it's just this is your one shot. Does that truly encapsulate a student's growth and understanding?
At the age of 10.
Yeah, at the age of 10.
Come on.
In the United States, I almost feel like it's worse, because we have our state testing, which is it's all related. It's the same kind of thing, and it starts in 3rd grade, and every year we call it in the Virginia Beach system, we call it the SOLs, which I think is hilarious because that acronym can mean other things. Like S out of luck, it could mean shite out of luck, but it stands for Yeah,
I've
it's
not heard that phrase over here.
well, it is kind of an American phrase, but it doesn't mean that, but that's kind of what teachers say is because, and exactly that and teachers tend to spend that first semester making these great, fun, engaging learning plans and really getting to know students and pushing for that student growth. And then we get to the midterm and it's like, all right, now we got to get ready to get everybody to pass this test or we're not going to get funded. Do you guys feel that same anxiety?
Exactly the same. And I'll tell you one of the most heartbreaking things that happened to me. So I have 3 children, and after COVID, my eldest, so my oldest son, went back into year 6, which is the year where he'll be doing the assessment. So bear in mind, he's just gone back after COVID, like finally back in school. It's September, the start of our new year. The SATs don't happen till May, as I explained. He came home after his first day back. I was like, how was your first day of year 6? And he told me they've been doing SATs papers, practice papers.
Day one
For something that's like, how many months is that? 9 months away. And I was totally devastated. And I, like, obviously he didn't mind, and, you know, nothing against the school, because that every school across the country was probably doing the same thing. But I just felt, whoa, like, did we not learn anything in the pandemic? And that really boggled me, and just thinking, is this what education's about? Like, so, someone once asked me, I had this amazing lady give a guest lecture once many years ago, and the first question she asked my students, she stood in the lecture theatre with like 200 university students, and she said, if an alien came down to our planet and they saw you and they came over and they said, what on earth is your education system about? What would you say? And the discussion from that was really interesting. And that question's always stuck with me. Like, if an alien came down and asked us what our education system is about, what would we say? And I feel like a lot of us in England and USA would maybe not be saying what we would love it to be. Like, it doesn't feel like it's quite there yet, right?
No, in fact, I feel like we're kind of, and I think the intentions were good, because I understand, like in the United States we had the No Child Left Behind Act, which I think the intentions were good, but there's a like a comedy of errors as far as misunderstandings, to the point where we're putting the cart before the horse, and we've gotten to a situation where we're forgetting what's really important. And like, how important is student growth versus passing a standard? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, to you, wouldn't you agree that student growth is much more important?
They're chalk and cheese, right? Because you're teaching people to do a test.
Yeah.
And we use the word grooming. I would say they're being groomed for understanding what the questions look like. Like, I've seen teachers even making sure all their homework they send home is in like the same font as the SATs papers. Like, it looks the same. So we're kind of preparing them so the paper's not a shock. So again, you'd question, you know, how true are these tests when they've been doing past papers? But yeah, you're right. Student growth is all that matters. So I can see again why we need to check what's happening in schools. But I'm sure you've heard there's been some really shocking things over here recently about Ofsted, who are the inspectors for most of our schools, and the pressures on head teachers. We unfortunately had a head teacher who committed suicide because she just felt so much pressure.
That's
and she was
terrible.
An amazing person. And so just really, I think when you look at preparing children to pass a test, it makes you question, is that growing them in the right way? Or are we just, you know, growing them on a conveyor belt?
Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder too how the education system as a whole really is focused for. I mean, let me ask you this really open-ended question: what should, I'm not going to say what is, but what should be the purpose of an educator, of a teacher, in the lives of students, from primary school, which is our elementary school, all the way up to university?
Oh, what is the purpose? So
what should be the purpose? Because I think sometimes that's kind of like that. What is our why? What is our collective why? and what should it be when educating students, would you say?
So yeah, and I often think about this a lot, actually, about even the word teacher. Like, I actually think when we question like what is our role, I quite like the thought more of like a facilitator. Like, we should be facilitating, but maybe even more than that. Like, particularly now as someone who, you know, I was a primary school teacher for 11 years. I'm now I work at university as a professor, but what I realize is I'm mostly a coach. I feel like my students come in, they're feeling anxious about something, like things are going on at home, and I feel like I'm coaching them. So I think a lot of your role is that, right? It's not just delivering the academic content, but it's about nurturing this person, like having this person feel heard. So I think you need to be a good listener, you need to be approachable, you need people skills. And again, this always sticks with me. Once I had a student many years ago, obviously no name. They had amazing attendance. Their attendance was 100%, pretty much 100%. I think they're one of the only students I've ever known get 100% for coming to every lecture and every seminar. They came out with a first, so that's our highest degree. Not sure, do you call it a first in America?
No, we first. Not sure what that equates to.
What's like the best degree you can get at around 21?
Usually, well, that's you can get. Well, you probably get with honors. We have like honors and valedictorian, but probably
Okay,
valedictorian.
Honors.
Yeah.
Okay, so like the best kind of category that they could get, but they couldn't get onto a teacher training program, and so okay, they were very committed. They were amazing at doing their assignments. They had amazing grades, but actually, one thing maybe they didn't have was the people skills. To be a good teacher, and they didn't get onto a teacher training program still, as far as I'm aware, and that really made me question what does make a good teacher. And I think it's about being human and non-judgmental. And it really interesting for me, I think a lot of the skills you need actually aren't to do with teaching at all.
Yeah, it's people. You're right. It's being human, people skills. It's very similar. I was a robotics mentor for several years. And one of the interesting things was that a lot in elementary school, a lot of the teachers just simply assumed that any student that was labeled gifted or any student that was making the best grades would be a good fit for robotics. But what we found was it was actually the students that weren't always the top student in the class or weren't always the gifted students. It was the students who we're used to being challenged. We're used to having to overcome adversity. And a lot of times it's the students that had nothing else going on. This was their thing. They almost found their identity with it. And those were the ones that got the most out of it. And those were the hardest workers. And those were the ones that found the most success. Wow. You know, conversely, we would get some of the gifted students would come in, and for the first time, they actually felt challenged, where like everything was coming easy to them up to this point. Now they almost froze up. And I'll never forget, we had these two girls that would come in every day before we even start the meeting. They were already in the toolbox, working some idea that they talked about at recess. You know, they were like, "Oh, we're going to try it this way," and boom, and they were already ready to go. And they ended up getting into the finals in our competition that year. So
wow.
I find that it's you're absolutely right. Well, it's not always sometimes I think we might equate success. Success can be a lot of different things, but you really have to have an it factor. There's something that you can't learn in any teaching prep school. That it almost has to be innate. Wouldn't you agree? Like it has to be kind of that people. You know, you almost have to have that calling to be a teacher.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we often talk about that over here in England. Like, is teaching a vocation? Like, are you know, are teachers born or bred?
Yeah.
And it's a really tricky one. But I like what you're saying as well. Like, I get a lot of students apply for my degree at university, and sometimes they're mature students, so they're in their 40s, 50s, and I don't know if I'm too old to train to be a teacher. And I always say to them, like, teaching is not about age. Like, the fact that you'll have life experience that you can bring, you know, you can talk about challenges you've overcome, you'll be able to relate to so many different things that have happened, so more chance you'll have, you know, things in connection with your students. And they're like, oh yeah. And so I think as well, we often think, you know, get people training to be a teacher as soon as they finish university, get them into classrooms. But actually, I think it's the one profession where actually the older you are, perhaps again, I'm generalizing,
No.
but the more life experience you have can make you the better teacher. So again, that maybe questions what is a teacher about, and you are that guide, like guiding your learners with their learning, but also in life. I think,
Yes.
you know, so for some of them really do not want to tell me anything about their private life, but some of them really do. And I think that was one thing I really learned for children when I was teaching in the primary school and elementary school. Some of them don't always have that adult at home who's available through no fault of the adult, because, you know, I'm a working mom. I know how hard it is when you're working, you know, and you need a break yourself, and it's hard to always be emotionally available for your children. But if we can provide that as teachers, we know that the children can come in, they've got someone to talk to. That's really valuable, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you might be their primary adult influence, like their paternal or maternal influence. And it's funny because sometimes every year, at least one student will call me mom or dad by accident, just slip. But I think it's perfect. And I always, like, they get embarrassed. I always say, no, because while you're here in my classroom, I'm your mom, I'm your dad, I'm your doctor, I'm your nurse, I'm your psychologist, I'm your game show host. And I go through the whole thing because that's what they get. That's some cases, that's all they get. And like you said, it's not necessarily a fault of the parents. You know, today's society, the parents are dealing with so much. And when I was growing up, my mom was a middle school teacher. And so when she would work all day and then she'd come home, and now she's got another kid after she just dealt with 30 kids all day. And now she came home with that. But it's, I think it's important to remember that there is an unwritten curriculum when you're teaching. And and for me, I think our why is kind of, we're here to help grow these students to be the best that they can be as adults. And that it's not just with math or reading or language or you know, social studies, what have you, but also those intangible like social skills, life skills, everything from learning how to tie your shoe to how to deal with a conflict resolution. One thing I've noticed, and I want to know if you've noticed, do you feel like the COVID lockdowns, how did that impact not just student learning as far as academics, but the social skills and coping skills of students? Did you notice any changes in that?
Yeah, so good question. I mean, I don't know if you know that film Sliding Doors.
Yes. Is that Gwyneth Paltrow, right?
Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah.
I love that film. But what? Sorry, my children just going to bed. I'm just waving.
Good night.
I guess it's kind of like that film though, because we'll never know what these learners would have been like without the pandemic. So sometimes, like, I'm sat in the lecture theatre, you know, some students are really shy, and most of them are, you know, 18 to 21, and I think, are you shy because you've had a really difficult few years with the pandemic, or would you have been shy anyway? So it's kind of like Sliding Doors.
Yeah.
We'll never really know how they would have been without the pandemic.
True.
But generally, I would say, you know, things I noticed with my own children in the younger years was that they miss so many social occasions. Like, but I mean, children are so resilient, as you know, Aaron. So they just get on with it. But luckily, you know, I had 3 children in the home. They had each other. But for children that were an only child, I think that's really different. And then having to come back, I know a lot of parents who told me their child just found it really overwhelming. They're used to, you know, some of them were at home getting so much attention, to suddenly go back into a class of 30 is big. And another thing I know, my friend who works with babies said that a lot of babies that had gone through the pandemic looking at people wearing masks all the time were then, you know, finding it really hard to understand about body language and facial expression, because
Interesting.
they were just used to like only hearing voices and not really reading faces. So, and again, it's too soon to know will that really have an effect or to really measure, but it does make you wonder, doesn't it? How would life look if that hadn't have happened? And I guess we'll never know. I would say anxiety seems higher. Generally,
Yeah.
students now seem more anxious. I know a lot of them, you know, some of them, my third years who've just graduated or just about to graduate, their first year of uni was online. And they said it was only in year 2. They finally knew some of the initials that had just been online, you know, like N. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, you're Natasha, hi. And like, here's your face. Because,
yeah.
you know, we couldn't force them to put cameras on. So normally out of a class of 30 students, 30 adult students, you'd have maybe the two brave ones with the camera on, the rest, you know, no cameras on. So a lot of them didn't even know what their students looked like. And I mean, that's a crazy experience. So yeah.
I felt that because of my first full year teaching virtual, we did have to take the SOL, which the standard says in
Yeah.
person. Yeah, they had to take that. We didn't tell them it was called the shite out of luck, but they had to come in, and it was crazy the reaction. One, their reaction to seeing me. You know, I think they thought of me as just this tiny little gnome. And then here I am. I'm like 6 feet tall.
Are you not?
I know, right? Hell, I'm gonna put a magic gem in your garden. No, they come in and they see this giant, like they thought I was Hagrid. And but the flip side was the kids that I thought were tiny were tall, and some of the kids that I thought were like really tall because their camera was like this ended up being like 3 feet tall. And it was really surreal, that, and of course we're wearing the masks and whatnot, and it was really bizarre to kind of like almost like a culture shock. They're like, oh, we're actually physically in the room now versus online, and having to go through that. The following year we were all face to face, but for up until about April we had the mask requirements, where we had, and so for the whole year we're all teaching like this, and then after spring break we all came back without our masks on, and everybody got to see what we looked like without our mask, and it was again one of those cold, like, oh, that's what your teeth look like, oh, that's one of those. Yeah. But I also wonder, and it could be one of those, like you said, sliding doors situations, because I felt like before the lockdowns happened, that 2019, 2020, there were things going on in education, both with teachers and with students, where we were kind of sliding into some turbulent waters anyways. And I think in some ways the COVID lockdown shone a light on some of those challenges, as well as kind of made a lot of people rethink what's really important. And I think that's a huge thing, is to really go back to your why. And I feel like it really made me think about, why are we pushing for this standardized test? Why are we so worried about that versus what? There's no reason to stress these kids out. The last thing I want them to do is feel anxiety coming into the building. I want them to be excited. We're gonna work with we're gonna do simple machines today, something like that. I want to just kind of switch gears into a little bit positive. What have been some of your most positive experiences teaching, and one of those yes moments that you've had? Does anything come to mind?
Ooh, I do have one thing that still makes me really emotional, like even now. Do you know the singer Sia? She's Australian. She's like SIA.
Oh, okay, yes.
So she's got a song called Titanium.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Okay,
I'm familiar with the song.
You'll know if you hear it, yeah.
I try to be in touch with pop culture, but sometimes I show my age. I'm like, oh, is that Saya? Like, I used to call the singer Sade, I used to call her Sade. I was like, hey, that's that Sade song, right? And they're like,
it's an easy mistake. It's an easy mistake.
So Sia has a song.
Yeah, Sia has a song called Titanium, and so it's still played on the radio like quite frequently here.
Yeah.
And so this was a popular song. So at the time, I was a year 4 teachers. So children were 8 and 9.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's about right. 8 and 9. And this is a long time ago. But one of my pupils in my class had a parent who was deaf. And it was, I don't, do you do class assemblies in America?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we
I
do.
bet you do.
Yep.
I bet you
Yes.
go to town. Okay. So it was my turn for my class assembly. So, you kind of know like a term in advance that your assembly's coming. So you kind of prep, you write the little play, they learn a song, like very cute. I love those opportunities. And all the parents and carers are invited to come. So
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that we did secretly, and I told this pupil, like, don't tell your mum that we're going to do this, is that I taught my children, with the help of a very good YouTube tutorial, taught my class, so my class of 30, to sign British Sign Language to this song by Sia, because it was science materials. So that was the link, because the song's about being bulletproof.
Yeah.
So we did this whole like little cheesy assembly about, circuits, and the kids were like being light bulbs and wires. Like it was awful but amazing at the same time, as they all are. And then it got to like the last few minutes, and I was like, hit the speaker. I've got my little assistant there, the one child who just prefers to help. Pressing play. And then all 30 stood up and they were singing while signing this song. And then the people hadn't told their mom, and she was in the crowd, and she just, it was the most amazing moment, because she just couldn't believe, because she couldn't actually, she used to sign to her child, who would translate to me what their mom was saying. So I'd never really been able to communicate well with the mom. And it was just amazing to think, hopefully now she's understanding like what my whole class is saying to her. And it was just so beautiful. And yeah, every time I hear that song now, it totally, how a song just transports you. It just takes me back to being in that kind of, that school hall that smelled a bit of feet and old dinners, and seeing that mum, just seeing that moment, and looking at her child, who, again, naming no names, but the child had a really rocky journey. They'd only been in my class one term, because they'd come with anger management issues.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing their face, like as they were looking at their mom and their mom was looking at them, it was just magic. And those are the moments of teaching that you have to hold on to, because sometimes when all the rest is really grey and tough, it's so worth it for those little moments of magic that you get, right?
Knocking it out of the park. I mean, that's the stuff you remember. And I in the United States, they have they always do like a teacher of the year and award, and what they look for a lot of times. I've been nominated for teacher of the year so many times. I became like the Susan Lucci of, but here's the thing: whenever they give me the application for it, you look at the application, and the application is all right. What committees were you a part of? What trainings have you led? What professional developments have you attended? It's very political.
Yeah.
And you look at it, and there's nothing,
not child-centered at
there's
all.
Nothing. There's no student endorsements or parent endorsements. There's nothing about like, what have you done to grow for student growth, or what have been some aha moments, or what are some things that you've done in a lesson. It had very little to do with what you did in the classroom. And to me, I always felt like that's not an award worth having. But having a moment like you just described, that's teacher of the year moment. That's worth 10 teachers of the year.
Could you just give me like a virtual gold star?
Yeah, there you go. Gold star. There you go. You get a sunny day today. Yeah, but that's what I think is missing is the focus on that. And it goes back to the why we're doing this, and why and I really wish that education could really make that shift towards how are we going to prepare these kids? How are we going to have more of those moments? Because I don't think these kids aren't going to grow up and go, I remember when Dr. Gibson got me to read that prep sheet, and I answered and I slashed my trash, and I eliminated 2 of the responses, and I was able to go back and use context clues. Well, I really, that's now I'm a valedictorian. Now I got the first place degree because of that. No, they're going to remember that student's going to remember what you did for her mom. And that's what we need more of, I think, in our education system. I have how does UK and both, I guess, both in university as well as primary school, how is special education treated and managed in the UK? And because I'm curious as how it compares to us.
So many years ago, before we had our SEND code of practice, which is like government policy, the education system used to separate people with severe learning difficulties or needs into separate schools, like special schools, and they weren't allowed in the mainstream schools. But luckily, as we saw a shift towards more inclusive practice a couple of decades ago, with the SEND, Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Code of Practice, it really made educators question, actually, should we just be separating children, or should we actually try and have a more inclusive classroom? So now most children are mainstreamed, which means like they go to just their local closest school, and their needs are kind of catered for within the school. We still have some special schools, or we have schools with like a special unit, often, for example, like an autism unit, where there are children that, it just wouldn't be in their best interest to be in a classroom with 30 other children, because their needs wouldn't be met so well. So we still have some special schools and special units, but our main focus at the moment in England is kind of trying to, and in England we have a different curriculum from Scotland and Ireland and Wales as well. So even though we're the United Kingdom, we're not united when it comes to education.
Well, I think the Scottish curriculum was like, who do you think you are? That's my dad's impersonation. My dad's side of the family is Scottish, and so,
oh, no way!
Yeah, so
amazing!
I believe we have a castle somewhere. It's I don't know. That's my terrible Scottish accent. Sorry, I apologize to the late Sean Connery.
It was good. I could see what you're doing there. It was good. But I mean, they do have a great system. If your dad grew up there, they do have a really great education system. But again, if you look at Scotland, for example, you've got about, I don't know the maths exactly, but a quarter of the population of England spread over beautiful, hills and lochs. So again, I mean, you must also remember that one curriculum isn't going to work the same everywhere else. I mean, England's very different demographic, but yeah, the majority, we're trying to have children in one inclusive classroom where possible, and then support their needs through. So children might have an individual education plan. Some children might get like a one-to-one support or teaching assistant, but at the moment, I mean, funding is the issue. I'm sure you've seen strikes happening in England.
Yeah,
strikes. So a lot of that comes down
to
the funding, and then as a result of that funding, losing teaching assistants, who are normally there in the class to help and support, losing some of this one-to-one intervention. So there's kind of, benefits for trying to have all children included, but then the challenge, thinking, is this really meeting the child's needs in the best way? And kind of like the sliding doors thing again.
Yeah.
I guess you'll never know. Like, you want the child to feel included and not stigmatized, and have the social group that they could have. But yeah, I guess you'll never always know what's best for each child. And as a parent or carer, you just have to try and make the best decision, don't you?
Exactly. It sounds like it's a lot similar to what we do here. We have IEPs, individual education plans, and we have a primarily inclusive. We actually have, like, we would break down a grade level into, there'll be inclusion classes where there will be a gen ed class, but a portion of that class would be students with special needs. And then we would have we'll have a special education team where they would have a special educator as well as a special education assistant. And they would, like, when they could, and again, in the ideal picture perfect world, they would be able to have those one-on-ones or those small group remediations, or those to meet their needs, depending on their IEP and depending on what's going to help them. But they would be part of the regular classroom. I think sometimes where we fall a little bit short is again, going back to growth versus expecting to pass a standard. If you have a student that clearly is not going to pass the standard, it's kind of I almost feel it's almost harmful to push them towards that standard, but to create a goal that's more reasonable in that zone of development, I think is where we really need to focus. But again, I think the folks that make a lot of the decisions, and it sounds like it's the same in the UK, the folks that are making a lot of these decisions are so far removed from the classroom that they don't really see what's really going on. I mean, you could crush a student if you tell them, like I think I said on your radio show, I had a student that couldn't read when he got to me. He was 0 on his Lexile, and I got him to 540. Well, I don't even say I got him. I helped him get to 540 because it was his effort. You know, like you said, I was a coach getting him, but he was the one in the game, and he got to 540, and he was so proud. He told his grandma. He was so excited, and he to me, that's a victory, even though he's still not passing, you know, where he should be. To me, that's a victory. And that's the stuff that should be celebrated. And I feel, and of course, you know, I go and we were having his IEP meeting. His grandmother's in there, and she's telling me how he came home and was just telling her about it. And so I got this big smile on my face. So I leave the IEP meeting and I go into our collaborative planning, and I must have missed a very hostile argument between one of the other teachers and the principal, because I walk in and it's dead silence and everybody just looks miserable, and I come bursting in. Hey everybody, how's it going? What a great afternoon it is today. What are we up to? What are we working on?
Oh,
cricket. I'm like,
well, I hope they asked why you were so happy, and I hope they let you share that joy.
Well, I didn't even give him a chance. I said, name redacted. Just got to 540 on the Lexile. And again, the knee-jerk reaction of the principal was, so I still didn't pass. And she corrected herself, but that's good growth. And it was one of those things. But again, I think that's that perspective shift. But you weren't going to steal my sunshine. I don't care how negative that was. Touching on that though, and kind of, I think it's impossible for two people like you and I to not be positive. But do you feel like a lot of it's hard to get good teachers now in the UK / keep good teachers and support? Is there a struggle?
I mean, some of my best friends are teachers and they're amazing and they're still teaching.
Yep.
But I do think, you know, the fact we've had so many strikes, I can't even remember how many strike days we've had just in 2023. Like, and this at university as well. You know, great lecturers going on strike. Mm-hmm. So although at the moment I see those people who really, you know, love teaching, they don't want to go anywhere. But it does, you know, it does make me wonder, where are we going to be in a year's time? Obviously, some people have left already. Mm-hmm. And they're finding, you know, their kind of new pathway. Like, I'd say every week I see a couple of tweets on Twitter saying, you know, right, I'm off to something else now, like goodbye teaching. And I think that's great for them as well, because I think you need to know, you need to be true to yourself. And I don't think it's, you know, if this is the end of your teaching journey, don't feel guilt for that. You're doing the right thing for you. Like, for me, I was kind of at that point. I've been teaching for 11 years, teaching children. And then I did question, is this the end of my education journey? Because loads of things were going on for me. But I knew in my heart that I still needed to teach. And that's when the lectureship came up. I became a lecturer. So I think those people that do want to teach will always find a way. And I know people who've left and started their own consultancy. You know, now they go into schools and things. So I think, because I kind of agree with you what you're saying, that maybe there is something innate in us. And I do think for those people, even if they do leave teaching, they'll still do something purposeful. Mm-hmm. But to keep them, I think, you know, they just need better conditions. They just need, and I know it's very different over there. I know a lot of you have to buy your own resources. You know, I'm often sharing lists for people on Twitter and things. But over here, similarly, a lot of people now having to use their own money to buy things for school, and often you can claim some back on expenses, but with the funding crunches. So, and 30 is a lot. 30 children is a lot. So you might think, oh, I want to buy one pair of good luck socks. I've seen some very sweet stuff on social media this week, giving children good luck socks to do their exams. But, one pair of socks is fine. By the time you bought 30 pairs of socks, it soon adds up. And when you're not being paid enough, and I think back to the other thing you said, Aaron, that all the things we do, so we're kind of like the parent in situ. We're also the teacher who has to deliver some content. We are like a psychologist. We're a coach. We're a nurse for, when they've fallen over and they come in.
Bloody nose.
You do everything, but you're not getting the pay packet of doing all those things. So you're doing everything, but you're getting paid a very small amount. And I think if things are going to change, that's what people need, is to be paid for their time. Because, also, as you said, that clock finishes at, 3:15 or 3:30 or 6 p.m. by the time you've stayed and done your marking.
Yeah.
But you're always thinking about them because you care. So even though you might be, you've closed your laptop, you're still thinking about them. You're still, I remember when I was working with younger children, I used to save all my yogurt pots, ready to take them in for some junk modeling, and you're just so immersed in it that it is exhausting, and you just want to be appreciated for what you do.
Big time. I actually was in a discussion, and I want to talk about teacher unions and strikes and whatnot too, but I was in a discussion with the teachers union rep and a few others, and they were talking about, we're fighting for you. We're fighting to get better teacher pay. And I sat there and I said, I really don't need more money. I need to enjoy what I do again. And I think there's a lot of teachers that feel that way, because at least in what I've noticed in our school systems here, and a lot of American teachers I've talked to, the solution for a lot of issues in school systems is to dump the issue onto the teacher and make the teacher solve it. And that needs to change. And I know that, ideally it'd be great to have not just special educator assistants, but I think every grade level needs an assistant. You need, it takes a village, and to have a 1-on-30 classroom setup is insane, because even if every student is perfectly behaved, and I can't imagine one 8-year-old or 9-year-old willing to sit at their desk for 8 hours. Like, to me, it's like, no, we got to go touch some grass. Come on, let's go. But I feel like it's more to do with feeling like the teacher that I know I could be. And there's when you have both hands tied behind your back for all these different reasons, you don't feel safe, you don't feel supported, you don't feel appreciated. It's tough to be that superstar teacher. And what's worse is, I think we're all also our worst critics. When I'm getting observed for a teaching lesson, I feel like it's going a lot worse than the teacher the person observing me, because I know everything I did wrong, even if nobody else noticed it. And I have to remind myself, no, the kids didn't know. And the person observing definitely didn't know, or if they did, it's something trivial. But I think that it's that desire, because when you know what kind of awesome rock star teacher you could be, and you don't have the energy, the morale, or in some cases you're not allowed to because of certain policies or regulation, it's really tough to really get excited about teaching. Have you felt that way, or have you had friends that felt that way?
I mean, so obviously I'm not in the primary school now, so I have to also just appreciate, I was there 6 years ago, so 6 years I've been lecturing.
Long time, yeah.
But I mean, I think things seem to be worse now in terms of the things teachers are having to do, because a lot of funding for external agencies or things have been cut. So, you're doing more of maybe mental health support. Obviously, you've come through a pandemic in that time. But even when I was a teacher, many moons ago, there certainly were times where, there were things you wanted to do, but you couldn't because you hadn't done a risk assessment, or and obviously we need to keep children safe, but
Yes.
there's that point where you almost feel like, I'm not even going to plan, it would put you off doing things. You thought, I want to take the children to the local pond, but I've got to then I have to do a risk assessment, I have to do all of this. And so, I mean, that's a bad example. That sounds like I'm someone who doesn't like risk assessments, but I guess sometimes it felt to me like the policy and procedures weren't always the most user friendly, which, was taking up so much of your time when you needed that time and energy for the classroom. Equally marking. So kind of one school I worked in, again, no names, but the marking policy was so heavy that, okay, I was only teaching in the classroom 9 till 3:15, but then I was marking for another 6 hours, straight after school from like 3 till 10, because the school had a policy where you had to do write one pink comment, write one green comment, highlight at least 5 things in yellow highlighter, put a next steps marking comment. And you know that when you give the books out the next day, they're just going to turn to the new page ready to start the lesson. They don't care. The majority don't want to read feedback. They don't want to act on it. So I think for people who maybe are in schools where there are some of these policies that don't seem the most user friendly, certainly for me, marking was a big one. But equally, I've seen schools where, they're sufficient, just like with a tick and a comment is enough. And, the children would see that you put a smiley face and they're happy with that.
Yeah. It means more to a kid that they got a Pokemon sticker than, any kind of like, hey, I really like the way you conjugated that verb. They're not reading that. They're going to go show Mom, I got Pikachu. That's what they're going to go home and say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think it comes back to the people making a lot of these decisions are so far removed from the classroom. I think it's Japan that does a thing where the people that make the policies and design curriculum and update curriculum are teachers. What they do is they do a tour of duty. Like elementary teachers would be, or their equivalent of elementary teachers would spend 1 to 2 years doing like a tour of duty, like not quite an internship, but they get paid the same as they would as if they're in the classroom, but they would spend those 2 years working at the administration office with other teachers, developing curriculum, looking at policy, but from a teacher's perspective. And there's administrators involved in it, but it's much more getting teacher buy-in. Teachers and then after those 2 years, those teachers are going back to the classroom. So they know if they develop something that's stupid, they know they're going to have to deal with it when they get back. It's going to be like, who wrote this? Oh, I did. So, and I think that's something we look at, and it's a great way to set up recertification. Like instead of having to take a bunch of pointless classes, like, hey, you got to take this class on proper window dressing when you're teaching science, or you're having to do something silly like that. You actually get you get recertified if you do that tour of duty, or you could teach a professional development. Like I would love to teach professional development on Minecraft education and incorporating Minecraft into the classroom. And yet I feel like that would be more effective. But I feel like for example, I feel like the people making the decisions, they don't really see what may look good to them on paper, or in some cases they don't even care what looks good. They care what looks cheap, or how they're saving money, or they're what's going to make them look good. And in some cases, I think it's just they're so far disconnected from the classroom. For example, we have one of the many things you're talking about, your marks thing, where you have to highlight this and do this. Mm-hmm. We have to have learning targets up, and the propaganda for having learning target is you have to have posted somewhere what the target is for the kids to learn about. Like if you're teaching, let's say you're teaching solid, liquid, and gas, you have to have the learning target is I can identify the difference between a solid, liquid, and gas.
Okay, so we have similar. Ours are called learning objectives.
Yes.
And there's normally like 2 or 3 per lesson.
Yes.
And you normally should start your lesson. These are our learning objectives. Maybe the children stick them in their book. You've wasted a tree.
They stick them other places, but yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So and you're supposed to also, you have to have it clearly displayed, and the expectation is you begin every lesson and going, okay, class, today's learning target is blah. And number one, that doesn't work for every lesson, because I feel like my best lessons are when I don't tell them what the learning target is until we've gone halfway through the lesson. For example, because I want those aha moments. I don't want them to see where we're going before we actually do it. But the other thing is, a lot in the curriculum, the learning targets are worded at like a 20-year-old reading level. And so here you are teaching a bunch of first graders, like, all right, our learning target is I can identify the variable in this in my physical observation experiment. Now, this is how you spell cat. CAT. And it's like this, but the reality is those learning targets are not for the kids. They're for when the powers that be come in to evaluate, they know what you're doing. But it's presented as that. But I do want to talk to you about Minecraft education in a little bit. But you said there's a lot of strikes. Do you feel like paying compensation for teachers, like money, is the number one issue, or is there more to it than that?
I mean, I think there are so many factors, and obviously, as I say, I'm not a teacher, so I can't speak for primary school teachers, but I know what's happening at university level, because we still have strikes happening at university level. There's currently a marking and assessment boycott that some lecturers are taking part in, not me, like refusing to mark work as part of the strike. So obviously that, that's a big implication for students. And I think it's a lot of things, but I would guess it's something about just your autonomy being eroded, because I think when you train to be a teacher, you see yourself as a professional person. And my impression is that people are feeling like they're not being treated as professionals. They're not being given the agency that they feel they should have as professionals, whatever that is over. And so now I guess money is almost secondary, because when you go into teaching, you're not going to be earning, footballer's wage, for an example. you kind of know on the spectrum.
When you're an international educator like me, I mean, I don't know.
Well, I mean, you're breaking the trend coming overseas. I mean, you kind of know where teaching sits on the pay scale of life, and it's not you're not going in it for the money. You're going in it for that human connection and passion. So I think to say it's for the money isn't right, but I think there's something, the money is part of it. Something is there, because people just aren't feeling that their profession maybe is being upheld enough.
Like the not so much like I need to be not just the pay itself, but respectably paid. Like you're Dr. Poppy, you have a PhD. I have a master's degree in education. I don't feel like I'm treated like I do, especially the autonomy. And it's nothing against them, but we would have an instructor who taught for only 3 years. Then she would become the specialist, a reading specialist. And then she would come in and try to tell teachers that have been teaching for 20 plus years, this is how you're supposed to teach reading. And the teachers, they're telling it to teachers that have taught reading and have been effective for 20 plus years, being told now, oh, you're doing it wrong. Me, that's only taught 3 years of, in the classroom, this is explaining. And that's frustrating. I actually thought about getting my PhD, becoming Dr. Burden, and writing a book. I'm still thinking about that.
Do it.
I always wanted to have this moment in a collaborative meeting where somebody tries to tell me I'm wrong with my teaching, and they go, Dr. Burden disagrees, and then throw my book on the desk. Say,
I mean, that's the only reason that I did it, Aaron, so I can just do that.
Exactly, right? Well,
Dr.
Poppy says.
No, I'm too British, so I will never do that. I will just think about it. I'm far too polite.
So I would be up there saying, well, Erickson, Paget, and Gibson, They, the three Dr. Gibson actually, going through that whole thing. But that would be. I do feel like we're not appreciated or valued for the experience that we have. Also, safety. And again, it's hard. I don't know how it is in the UK, but in the United States, our mainstream media is very politicized, very, very slanted one way or the other. It's really hard to get the actual facts in a lot of stuff because you'll hear one take and then they'll go an extreme version, and a lot of that is kind of like the kids in the classroom that get the wrong kind of attention. It's like they become adults and then they get the wrong kind of attention because they want the clicks or they want the likes on Twitter or they want I feel like mainstream media, they want the views. So they'll go for the most out there headline. But like a lot of independent news sources tend to be a little more nuanced and, hey, this is kind of the truth. And when there's a shooting in a school, it's hard to get the true facts of what goes on because immediately the two political camps get into their agenda. There's, we need to ban all guns versus, we need to focus on this. And I feel like we're losing sight of the nuance and the whole what's really going on with these situations. But there does seem to be, and I don't know if it's just being reported, but we're seeing, teachers are feeling unsafe with. We just had a teacher shot in Newport News. This is a town north of us, was shot by a 6-year-old who brought a gun to school. A 6-year-old. Now again, right there, 6-year-old brings a gun to school. Right there alone, that's a big problem.
Was the teacher okay?
She's lived, but not. She had to go through multiple surgeries, and she's now suing the school system because what had happened is there was part of a system where he was supposed to be checked anyways. He had been telling kids he's bringing a gun to school.
Oh my gosh.
They knew he had the gun. They reported it to the administration, but the administration almost acted like they couldn't do anything. Well, no one saw the gun, so we can't search his book bag. Or no one, he's telling kids at the lunch table that he's gonna, if she gets on me or whatever, I'm gonna shoot her.
Oh my gosh.
By that afternoon, he shot her. And he's not being charged with anything. The mom is being charged with neglect. The mom is being charged with, negligence of like reckless storage of a firearm and felony neglect.
Wow.
Now, the latest, this was today came through. I'm going to share my screen with you. And again, this is one of those nuanced things where you kind of got to get a bunch of different facts. This is from the local NBC News. Newport News School Board says that Abigail Werner's injuries fall under state workman's compensation and can't be addressed through the lawsuit. So what they're arguing is because she was injured at work, that she can't sue the school system because it happened at school.
What?
And it's now again, this is such legalese. While in an ideal world, young children would not pose any danger to others, including their teachers, this is sadly not the reality. She sometimes can't get out of bed to her injuries. They are going after they are charging the mom, like I said, but
I was gonna say, yeah, the parents need to. I know it sounds like the school should have seen some red flags, but I mean, I think that's another thing, isn't it? Thinking where is that parent partnership with the school? Like, where does the culpability lie? I mean, the fact that a 6-year-old had access to a gun,
yeah,
is, I guess, a whole separate question. But yeah, I mean, good to see that the parent is being held accountable, because as someone of 6.
Well, in what world, where are we with society that 6-year-old sees that as okay, let alone encouraged? And to the point where, and again, there's so many factors. I mean, we could continue to. It's like in Minecraft. You keep digging, you can find more lava. It's like you could argue, the mom should have been more involved, but do we know her situation?
Yeah,
She
exactly.
could be single mom, overworked. Our economy with inflation and everything, she's stressed out, freaking out. The kid doesn't have positive role models. What he sees around him is macho. Hey, I'm gonna, if I have a gun, then I'm Mr. Tough Guy. That's how he gets his attention. But also, it would be different if this was like the kid just showed up and did this. But the fact that they brought this to the administrator's attention, more than one faculty member did this. And I've seen the same thing where, not to that degree, but I've had colleagues where they would refer a student to the office and they would be sent back about 5 minutes later with a Jolly Rancher. And it's like you're reinforcing the wrong things. So let me ask you this: in the UK, and I have questions in mind about university too. So these, I'm
loving talking to you, but time flies. I'm really conscious. We've already been talking so long. We might have to wrap it up soonish. I haven't had dinner.
Oh, absolutely. Well, again, just like.
But you're going to come back on the radio show.
Absolutely, and I promise I'll have more university-based questions for you as well. But any closing thoughts or any words of wisdom, and your whole side? I'd love to have you come back also on my mental health podcast too, because
cool.
That's much more, and it's not just focused on teachers, but like kind of dipping into that mental health. Any words of encouragement, especially because the month of May, this is that month that we're all going through assessment season, where the end is coming, but we've got to get through it. Any words of wisdom to our educators out there?
Ooh, any words of wisdom
or encouragement?
Do you know what I would say, okay, keep going. Like, we'll get through this. But also, if there's something you've been thinking about, dreaming of doing, writing that book, starting drawing again because you used to love it at school,
starting a podcast,
taking up running again, if there's something you've been thinking about doing, like, do it. Because you're right, Aaron, this is such a crazy month for everyone. Don't forget you. So my top tip that I would say, think what you're going to do for you this month, like, and every month. What is there something? And loads of people, like, when I tell people, like, oh yeah, my book's come out, they always say, oh, I wish I really want to write a book. I'm like, do it now. Get a Word document. Like, I'm watching you. Open your laptop, make a Word document, call it My Book Draft 1, and start typing. Like, there's no time like the present. And particularly for teachers, when you're giving so much of your energy, save that bit for you and use it purposefully to chase your dreams. Don't forget about you. And then hopefully that's how you'll find that balance, finding that work-life balance. And it's really tough to do that. But if you know you've got that one little project, that one little thing you're looking forward to doing on the weekend, that one thing you can do on a Tuesday night or whatever it is, that bit of you time, it's a bit like those magic moments we spoke about earlier, Aaron, like, you know, the children signing. If you've got those magic moments or that hobby, that passion outside of the classroom, that's holding on to you and who you are. You know, yes, you're an educator and you're an amazing one, but you're also you. You're also not just an educator. You're more than that. So I would just say follow your dreams as well.
Excellent. And on that note, for Dr. Poppy, this has been Mr. Burden, the Educators Podcast. We will definitely have a part 2, maybe a part 3. Who knows? Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Catch full episodes of the Educators Podcast every Thursday at 4 p.m. Real educators with the real issues in education. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, take care of yourself. Jeans passes to anyone who likes, shares, and comments on this video. Have a great week.